Thank you again for joining this afternoon. We had a little rain this afternoon at Yokoji. That's always, well, I'd say it's always well received. So not sometimes when it's torrential and in the storms it can be a little more difficulty. But it rained just a little bit before, but it's enough to for a while to cool the air and settle the dust, and importantly too, offer a little respite from the pretty much ever present danger, particularly in this season of fire risk. There's been quite a lot of small wildfires in the area through July and into August. I have a couple of different apps for keeping an eye on those things. Part of my role being the administrator here at Yokoji is I'm responsible to communicate to the residents and to the authorities, if there is to deal with any kind of evacuation. So I keep a close eye on it. But the real positive is I know the news very quickly through these notifications. But the downside is I know the news very quickly through these notifications, right? Because it's like, oh my gosh, there's like fires all of the time. I had no idea, but there's usually they're able to put them out with when they're just a couple of acres. There's and I that's something we've seen over the years, is that the firefighters and the crews that work on these fires, like anything else, they've had so much practice at it that they've become just really, really good at it. So fires that would have caused problems some years ago, now they're able to get a grip of them more quickly and more effectively, just through practice. But just that little bit of rain is brings so many different thoughts into my mind, and principle amongst them is, oh, okay, good, I don't have to worry right now for those for fires. um Earlier today I was in Long Beach area, kind of downtown. I was involved in some a service project to help at an urban garden, cleaning up in the area. It's in a pretty kind of industrial, and some areas that are like kind of more rougher than other areas. It's right down, um, almost under the 710 freeway, near the shore, down in Long Beach. An amazing spot in that it had it's a little urban garden in the middle of a concrete sprawl, which is quite difficult to find and tricky to park at, and you wouldn't know it was there. And then went in there, and it's a cleanup effort, and then some meditation, and it was very valuable experience. I knew, I had my idea about what to expect, but the actual, lived experience of something is always so very different to what we might project into the future or imagine something is going to be like. Right? That's how it is with our mind. We can imagine something as simple as going to a place for lunch tomorrow, right? And so we can conjure that up, pick a lunch spot that you're fond of, imagine what that's going to be like, and we can draw a sketch in our mind. But the sketch won't stand up to the reality. Will be very different. There'll be people we've never seen before, maybe someone we have seen before, right? The food might be particularly good, and there might be something that's particularly bad. All kinds of unknowns. But the lived experience is always much more than the idea of what something is going to be like. And I'm going to bring a koan up, which the experience this morning brought into my mind. Just a little more background to that experience, it's interesting to be in an environment that feels juxtaposed, like that feels like there are opposites going on, right? So you have like the freeway, which is a free very very loud, and everything that goes along with a freeway. You hear sirens, you hear people speeding by, the sights and sounds and smells of that. Um, there's a kind of concrete disused sprawl that has kind of trash and graffiti and things that have been abandoned. And then within this, there was this garden, which is just a place where life is, there's so much organic life erupting. Right? So I had these compost patch and just, plants and vegetables and things that are growing, just too many to name. So that is just going on with the freeway above and everything else that's going on around. And then the effort there was basically to clean the place up. It was like weed or trash. There's a disused building, and which has been colonized by a lot of feral cats. There's a lot of feral cats there, and some people make the effort. They come down there and they feed the cats, but then the cats are not neutered, so there's just a ton of cats breeding in that area, and there's food and waste. So all of this stuff is going on, and for my mind, um, I was struck by how I separate things into good and bad, right? In real time, what's desirable and what's not desirable. And that was even brought to the activity of weeding. Weeding, for instance. There was a moment when I was just doing some weeding when I wasn't sure if what I was looking at was a weed or a flower, right? Because it was, I'm particularly, I not well versed in California plant life. I can recognize a few things. I grew up in the UK, and if we were in the UK, I could, as a child, I was very interested. I had a garden, I liked to plant, and I knew the names of things. So I knew the names between different plants and animals. But when I moved to the United States and I be in California, I know my pine tree from an oak tree. Sometimes, and that's funny. Something as simple as that. When we've had residents at the Zen Center, and we've tried, and we teach people the difference between pine and oak, because with a lot of the dead trees and the fire abatement work that we do, you end up with a lot of you end up with a lot of logs, a lot of firewood, and you have pine and you have oak, and they burn very differently. Like the pine is fast burning, goes up in a flash, and tends to leave a lot of soot behind in the chimneys. So the chimneys need to be swept a lot. And the oak lasts a long, long time. So if you ever run for you, those of you who ever run a wood fire, it's when oak is good for the nighttime. You can put one on and kind of damp things down and leave it on overnight, and it lasts all the way till the next morning, where pine never would. Right? So we teach people like to separate between pine and oak, and it may be very obvious to us, but it's not obvious to somebody who might be coming here from the city. So I'm looking at this plant and I'm like, well, is it a weed or is it a flower? And in many ways, it's sort of an absurd question. And it's like, how do we value weeds and how do we value flowers? Right? The eye is drawn to things that are beautiful. And a flower may be some more obviously beautiful, but weeds too. I mean, not when you look at them, are also beautiful. And that ultimately is a label which we associate with things. Oh, that's a weed. That's something to be we don't want. And then there's a flower, and that's something that we do want. Of course, this was taking place adjacent to a vegetable garden where the distinctions are more obvious. right, between what is a weed and what is a plant. But just outside the garden, that kind of like blends. There was these like like tomato plants which are colonizing the industrial car park next door, right? So kind of spreading from the garden. You see, suddenly it's just like, oh my gosh, it's like cherry tomatoes growing next to like some like a disused can of junk right here. I didn't eat any of those, you know. I thought probably not smart to do that. So this all of this life that's happening amidst all of this, what you might think is not alive, and things that seem very beautiful and valuable, and things that might seem less beautiful or less valuable. But I was watching my own mind in terms of how those distinctions are made, how arbitrary a lot of the distinctions are, and how much those distinctions between good and bad we might inherit from a narrative, or from something we've been told, are our own ideas. But when we closely look at things, those distinctions those distinctions break down. Those distinctions break down even between what is, we might consider something that is alive, and something that we consider not alive. So that brings in the koan I wanted to bring in. This is actually from it's called the Denko Roku. This is an old jacket cover. It's a Zen book. It has a new. It's a couple of editions ago, so it has a new jacket now. But translates as the record of transmitting the light. The record of transmitting the light, and it's a collection of the enlightenment stories and realization experiences of all of the Buddhist teachers, from the Buddha through to Master Dogen, the 13th century Soto teacher, actually through Master Ajo, Dogen's first successor. So it goes from um, ancient world India, maybe 500 BCE, all the way to the 13th century, and links the teachers one to the other in a chain. And we like to look at lineage in the Zen school as that is an unbroken chain to the Buddha. But when it gets really distant into the past, somebody looked and did the math and realized, well, hold on, that person must have lived to about 140, because it's sort of things don't kind of add up a little bit. So you get more distant into India and things get a little bit more, well, we're not quite sure. But in the Dharma world, at least in the Zen lineage, when things arrive in China, the Chinese and the Japanese later on were incredibly advanced and meticulous record keepers, right? So there's like a lot of precision around even the hour, day, month, and year of when things occurred tend to be recorded well. Even all of that, maybe looking back 1400 years ago to China with that kind of precision. And so this transmission of the light, we can think of it as handing on the torch, or handing on the light of illumination from the Buddha to Mahakasyapa, from Mahakasyapa to Ananda, who were trained with the Buddha, and then, my memory breaks down as I'm not so, I don't remember the Indian transmissions as well as I do some of the later Chinese ones. But the one I wanted to bring up is from Chan period of China, which as you, for those of us who practice together, that I'm particularly fond of bringing up koans and remembrances from this part of the Zen tradition, Tang Dynasty China. And this is from Master Tozan. Master Tozan, in Soto Zen, so at Yokoji here, it's a Soto Zen temple. It's the lineage tradition that we're in. And the To from Soto is from the name Tozan, is from this teacher. So he is a founding teacher in China for the lineage of which Yokoji and many other Zen temples are an active part of today. So this is from Tozan Ryokai. Okay, so it says here, the 38th ancestor, so this would be the 38th generation after the Buddha in the lineage transmission, 38 generations after the Buddha. The 38th ancestor was Master Tozan. He visited Master Ungun and asked, who can hear the non-sentient preach the Dharma? So who can hear the non-sentient preach the Dharma? And Ungun answered, the non-sentient can hear the non-sentient preach the Dharma. Tozan asked, do you hear it? Ungun replied, if I could hear it, you would not be able to hear me preach the Dharma. Tozan said, in that case, you do not preach the Dharma. Ungun said, if you still don't hear me preach the Dharma, how much less can you hear the non-sentient preach the Dharma? It said that the master was greatly awakened at this point. And then he spoke this verse. Wonderful, wonderful, the preaching of the Dharma by the non-sentient is inconceivable. If you try to hear with your ears, it is hard to understand. When you listen with your mind's eye, then you know it. That's a verse written by Tozan in appreciation for this case. Now, back in these times and times prior and times after this, there was been some discussion, debate, even argument about what constitutes sentience. What is conscious and what is not? So even back in the ancient world in Buddhism, they were having a debate, and different schools and different lineages would have different ways of understanding what is sentient, what is conscious, and what does not. Right, so this is one of the many ways in which we divide up the world. Even, when I came to Yokoji, I noticed right away that we have the Bodhisattva vows, which are chanted in the evening, say, sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. That's the first of the Bodhisattva vows that are chanted. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Many people over the years have asked me and brought that up because it strikes them as how the heck are we going to do that, right? Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Because a vow, as you know in life, vows should not be taken lightly, right? That's the nature of a vow, a lasting promise to do something, to uphold something, to take care of something. So to say that every day, sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. In the movement of Mahayana Buddhism, we have a change of emphasis from toward a not the Bodhisattva vow is to help everyone achieve enlightenment until that's taken care of. It's like, so Avalokiteshvara, the personification of compassion, wants to help everyone achieve enlightenment before they do. Right? It's kind of a last one who leaves, turn out the light practice. You taking care of everyone else, and putting the many or the broader self, putting that one first. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. But it can also seem quite an inflated or arrogant statement, can it not? It's like, sentient beings or people are numberless. the sentient, those who have consciousness and can think and feel, they're numberless. I vow to save them all. Right? That, I mean, that can have like a dark shadow of, well, maybe they don't want saving. Have you, or just the absurdity of like how can you reach people in that way? For myself, it became a much more practical vow when I added the words "from me" at the end. Right, so it was sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them from me, from my worst, the worst aspects of my own nature. Like I can do a lot then around beings are numberless. I vow to save them from. I vow not to add or to increase difficulty or suffering. To err on that side, knowing that we will do. I value more and more the in Buddhism the principle of ahimsa, which means to do the least harm possible. Wow, that really strikes me as much more achievable now than having for many years I had that sense of I'm going to leave this life or this place better than I found it, right? But then, with living and with experience, I've come to see that doing the least harm possible might be more realistic. It's about sentient beings, but what is the how do we divide the world into sentient and insentient? In some schools of Buddhism, in practice, it's considered that only, I think, like human beings and animals have sentience, and that even plants might not, right? Might not be sentient. I would take issue with that. With that, right. I'd be on the debate. I've got the plants behind me here, and I can attest to the fact that these plants have feeling, have feeling. The trees here at Yokoji, there is, or at least I feel I intuit, or is a felt experience of life. Just of life, or maybe whether we call it sentient or not. These things are alive. Plants, as like at this garden this morning, is very obvious life. So do we draw the line of sentience there and say anything that is alive is sentient? But how about the rocks? How about the mountains? How about, we take the San Jacinto range here, the Yokoji sits on, and maybe for those who are down in the valley, you look up and see the San Jacinto mountains, sentient or insentient, alive or not alive. Really, really hard to say, to draw those lines. And do we put some things higher than another? After all, without these mountains, the temple here doesn't stand. The trees here can't grow. The creek, which is incredibly still running in August, doesn't run. And without these mountains, and the mountains are great examples of meditation. They sit so well, right? They sit. The mountains sit. The desert sits. The whole continent sits. Even the ocean sits. In that it is rooted. It is here and it is thus, and appears in this space and time, and is so. And yet, with many things, we split things up and make the distinctions. In the koan, it says, "Who can hear the non-sentient preach the Dharma?" We had a short meditation to close after cleaning up at this urban garden, just a short time to sit. And immediately, in that sitting, there are things that are very obvious, like the sound of the freeway. Now, do we take that? Is that insentient? Well, I could say, well, the 710 freeway as a distinct thing, it's hard to claim that it is sentient, just like, because it has no beginning and no end. It has a kind of random number ascribed to it. But essentially, but does it preach the Dharma? Do the insentient, do the rocks, does the freeway, does the concrete preach the Dharma? While I was sitting here earlier, just enjoying after the rain and the air, just the air itself tastes fresher and a little cleaner. It's preaching the Dharma. Very quiet. The silence. The fullness, the richness of profound silence is a deafening Dharma discourse. Silence, preaching the Dharma. And then the sound of a plane overhead. A voice that steps forward and adds something to the expression of the Dharma. We live in these environments of positive and negative and good and bad, and making these distinctions, and it's very important to make these distinctions, to be able to pick and choose between things which bring benefit and things that do not bring benefit, that make things that are negative. Of course, as human beings, we're functioning in a way that is, we use picking and choosing in order to support our lives and the broader life of those around us. But as we know, an aspect of the human condition is, left unchecked, the picking and choosing runs rampant and runs into every area where we're overdoing it, we're picking and choosing, right? And forming these fixed ideas around what is good and what is bad. And structures within our society and within our life takes advantage of that in order to sell us things or advance an agenda. Again, because, it's what is good and what is bad. So Tozan asks, who can hear the non-sentient preach the Dharma? Do we not all hear that? Do we hear the Dharma? In our practice together, often bring up that essential art of sitting, where choosing between having any choice in the content of meditation is picking and choosing. And that is something that is set aside in those 30 minutes. We let that rest, picking and choosing, even for a few moments, but setting that aside. Ultimately, in the practice of just sitting meditation, it is dissolving the barrier, the idea of the barrier between what is internal content and external content. Like the me sense of self is naturally obsessed with the internal content of the self. I say naturally because that is the human condition. It's all kinds of information going on. So we have thoughts and feelings and experience. And then we have the external realm that is appearing as it is, with sights and sounds. And again, we have positive and negative reactions to the content. We do so even with our own mind. Perhaps we show up to sitting and we're sitting and we planned our meditation. I've had a busy day. I'm looking forward to practice. This is okay. And now this is my time to sit, and everyone, we cultivate things in the room and get everything ready, and sit down, and the practice begins. And then you have a head full of thoughts, or you realize, well, actually I don't want to sit now. I thought I wanted to sit, but now I don't. I'm not interested in meditation. Or a car pulls up out, or somebody's car alarm goes off outside on the street. Interrupting our meditation. Right. So it might be inward, or it might be external, and we can be challenged then in our sitting, in our present awareness. Is this good? Is this bad? Here, the lens is it sentient? Is it insentient? But we can let all of these distinctions and separations, these divisions, we can let them deconstruct in our practice of present awareness, in our practice of sitting. Let all of these distinctions fall away and experience the thusness, the incredible depth and texture of this lived experience, and allow it in from every direction. Allow it from the inside, allow it from the outside, right? Declare that unilateral peace, right? Because often inside there's a little tussle going on. It shouldn't be like this. I wish it was a bit more like that. Oops, that's annoying. This is intriguing. And the mind is pulled around to go back into this picking and choosing. But with a straight back and being breathed, declare that unilateral peace and surrender to reality as is, as it is. That there is, it's that art of meditation. So then sitting in a garden under a freeway, you can enjoy the freeway, enjoy the plains, enjoy the concrete, enjoy the flowers too. But in the sights, the sounds, the smells, let those distinctions fall away. And you see that wherever you are is not different from wherever you've ever been. It's always this place. It's always this experience. Why not be awakened now? Always be alive and awake, just alive and awake to this now. So the non-sentient, so who can hear the non-sentient preach the Dharma? And Ungan says the non-sentient can hear the non-sentient preach the Dharma. It's kind of a tricky answer, isn't it? Doesn't help Tozan much, perhaps. The Tozan asked him, do you hear it? And he says, if I could hear it, you would not hear me preach the Dharma. Now this says something about the distinction. If you can hear me, if I can hear the difference between, if I pick and choose between sentient and insentient, he says, there's no Dharma talk. There's no realization. It's being stuck in, well, this is conscious and this isn't. This is sentient, this isn't. This is desirable, now this isn't. Where if we ever if we hold on to that fixed position in reality, Ungan says, you can't then hear me preach the Dharma, or you won't be able to. And Tozan's a little pushing back on this, and says, in that case, you do not preach the Dharma. So there's a little bit of this, what we call in Zen, a Dharma combat going here, where there is somebody presenting the essence of the way, and somebody, okay, it's like a tennis ball being hit over the net, It's like Tozan, a nice serve, and ooh, hold on, there's a speedy backhand coming back. He's got to scramble. He's got to go to the corner of the court to be able to knock this back. But he's able to knock it back across the net, and says, in that case, you do not preach the Dharma. And Ungan says, if you can't hear me preach the Dharma, how much less can you hear the non-sentient preach the Dharma? If you can't hear me preach it, right? So it's like if we're studying Dharma, if we're involved in meditation practice, if we're studying Buddhism, we have this wonderful long tradition. So many different traditions within Buddhism. Buddhism, gosh, you could study one small corner of Buddhism in a lifetime and you wouldn't exhaust it. Right? We have this vast woven quilt of Dharma that has come down from Shakyamuni Buddha through different cultures, through different countries, through so many different teachers, different cultures presented differently. Each one of us, we look at it now in California, you can't move for Dharma centers all over the West Coast. We can hop on Zoom, we can go on YouTube and listen to teachers from you can listen to Krishnamurti from 50 years ago. We can listen to teachers contemporary like now, right? From all over the world, often for free or for a donation. So we're spoiled with teachings, even at Insight, at our community. We're blessed with good teachers from different trainings and different strengths and different ways. And we can all go, we can practice with where our affinity lies most closely. That's always, that's important in Dharma study. So Ungan's saying, hey, if you can't hear me, if you can't hear some Dharma here in our conversation, living at a Zen temple on a mountain here, with everything crafted and set up for you, right? It's like being at Yokoji. If you can't get some realization of mind here with all of the bells and the incense and the creek running by, well, good luck hearing the Dharma of the freeway. That's going to be more difficult. It's going to be more difficult. So we come to practice, right? Because to set up a container of practice, to sit together, which is always stronger. My back is straighter for slouching and then glancing and seeing you sit. Reminds me, all right, Jokai, make some effort here. You're supposed to be, right? It's like I sit better because you're sitting and I can see that you're making the effort. So we craft it in order that we can practice together and nourish the practice and help one another. So that when, we're not together in community, when it's not called the Dharma, when you're driving down, you're driving along Highway 111 and somebody cuts you off, or, you're walking in, it's, sometimes I go to Costco. And so for me, I'm just like, I try and get in and out of there as quick as I can, it's overwhelming. I'm always wrong with it. I'm always in the wrong place with the cart, these huge carts, and I line up at the self checkout and it's like the line's over there, and I'm like, oh, I'm that guy at Costco. So, but we practice in a Dharma container so that we can realize the Dharma container everywhere we go, in whatever circumstance, no matter how busy, no matter how the forms appear. Weeds and flowers and freeways and gardens and people who annoy us and people who inspire us. These distinctions are there. Sure, we could have a debate. Well, in the 5 minutes we have left, I doubt we could settle a matter of sentient and insentient. What we can do is to refine this art of practice, that we can really deeply realize how to see beyond, or how to let these distinctions see through these distinctions, good, bad, sentient, insentient, and set them aside. Use them when they're useful, and they help bring benefit, promote connection and love, compassion. Use the distinctions. But when distinctions cause separation and suffering and othering, difficulty, hatred, then that's when we go beyond the distinctions in order to return to wholeness, to real connection. So don't underestimate the power of this still sitting that we do together, and the accumulative power of the regularity and the discipline of giving some part of the day to stillness and to just as isness. Because you do that and it is embodied. It is embodied. You become a person of presence. There's another Doan Dohi, some generations after Tozan in Japan here, said, if you wish to become a person of thusness, if you wish to become a person of suchness, you should practice suchness without delay. As you are already such a person, why worry about such a thing? So if you want to be a person of suchness, of thusness, of presence and stillness, then practice presence and stillness. This body-mind smiles and recognizes itself in stillness. And that then is what is transmitted and shared in our lives, in our field of activity with others. Still making mistakes, still getting things wrong, right? But that's how Buddhas are made. That's how Buddhas are made. Okay, we just have a couple of minutes left, so and if we go a couple over, that's fine too. But I want to leave a little space for any comment, any question, anything anybody would like to share, to raise and ask. And I just wanted to make sure to thank all of those that are continuing to help with the volunteerism to protect the Sangha and make sure that it continue. I see many. I won't name everyone because then I might leave somebody out. But those who have done it in the past and they continue to do it in the present, and for those who will help in the future, because it takes work to maintain a Sangha, and I appreciate it. Well, my friends, thank you. Thanks so much.